Hey everyone, welcome back to the MindShift Podcast. I'm excited to have with me today Ed Tate. Now, Ed Tate and I go back a little ways. Funny story I'll talk about a little bit later. But Ed is an award-winning international keynote speaker, trainer, author, and former executive. Worldwide, he is known as the speaker who energizes, educates, and entertains. To date, he has spoken professionally in 50 states, 25 countries, and on 5 continents. Ed won the American Idol of public speaking, becoming the 2000 World Champion of Public Speaking, Toastmaster International's most prestigious speaking award among its 352,000 global members. In 2008, Ed earned the Certified Speaking Professional designation by the National Speakers Association. It is the speaking profession's international measure of professional platform skill. It is an honor bestowed on slightly more than 12% of its members. Ed Tate, I've been chasing you down for months. I'm glad you, since you were on the continent of Africa, I am so glad to have you here today with me, sir. Welcome to the show.
I've been looking forward to this, Darrell. So thank you for having me on your show. We're going to have a great deal of fun.
We absolutely are. I got to start right out the gate. When you and I met each other, we actually hadn't, that was the first time we physically met. We met in 2017 or 18 at one of our local live events, and you knew my business partner at the time, and you guys were friends. And then I watched you walk in and sit in our VIP section, and I was like, oh, snap, I'm about to speak. Do you remember me telling you the story? Like, I was nervous as heck when I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, oh no, Ed Tate is in my audience. And I remember it's actually a great point to start because we were talking offline before this started. It wasn't as though I was afraid to speak. Well, let's start right away with the number one fear that people have about public speaking, because I went through it, but you said it wasn't that I was afraid to speak. What was it that happened?
You've heard it before. The number one fear is public speaking. You know, Seinfeld has this great joke. He talks about that, rather than giving the eulogy, most people would rather be in a coffin. Okay. And public speaking is not the number one fear. The number one fear is public humiliation. It's public embarrassment. This is what people actually fear. So that's what the real fear is. Yeah. And one thing I would invite you to do is, and you just reminded me of a very, very important point, is number one, there's no winning the comparison game. So when you saw me and says, oh God, I'm going to be speaking, for the Ed Tate, that's not the approach you should have. The approach that you should have is, I'm Darrell. I'm an expert on this topic and this subject. He may be the world champion of public speaking, but he's not nearly as good as I am on this topic, on this subject. And I'm inviting all your listeners to have that approach. I cold call Fortune 500 CEOs on a regular basis. And the reason I do that is because I put on that persona. I'm the world champion of public speaking. He or she may run this multi-global organization, but if they need my help, I'm the person who's the expert. And that's the mindset. That's the approach that you should have. This past week, I had conversations with clients and also my mastermind. And it occurred to me they were having what I call the 3 wrongs. And 3 wrongs don't make a right. The first wrong is their mindset. That's the first wrong. The second is they're having the wrong conversation. And the third wrong is they were talking to the wrong person. Last week, I won what I called an emergency keynote. Person contacts me up and says, hey, we need you on Tuesday. I said, fine, no problem. And then they said, well, we normally pay people like roughly over $1,000. I says, well, my fee's 15 grand. She says, 15,000, blah, 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 blah. I says, well, let me ask you a question. I said, you told me that last year you lost 7 clients. Is that correct? She said, yes. I said, so those clients were worth $250,000 piece. Is that right? Yes. So 7 times that is like roughly $1.4 million. Is that right? She says, yes. So if you pay me $15,000 and I can stop at least one of those $250,000 clients from going away, is that worth it? And the next thing she said to me was, send me an invoice.
That's right.
I had the right mindset. I own this. I'm good at what I do. Number two, I was talking to the right person. She's the CEO, and I was having the right conversation. The right conversation was monetizing the conversation, talking about the problem. What she paid somebody else, for a virtual presentation has nothing to do with Ed, has nothing to do with me whatsoever. I don't care.
Come on.
And by the way, whether I deliver my information to you virtually or live should not matter. What you should focus on is how I'm solving your problem. That's the right conversation. That's the right mindset.
Man, let me tell you, if you're listening right now, you can already tell this is going to be some heat. There's going to be some fire on this episode. Let me tell you. So I want to go. I love that. And it's true, right? So here we were at this event, and I'm so grateful still to this day for the comment and compliment that you gave me at the end to work me through my nervousness. And you gave me that very same coaching because you said I was here to learn marketing, not grade you as a speaker. And so I remember I remember walking, and we talked maybe about that at the VIP dinner or something. But no, seriously, the thing that was interesting was I met you prior, but you didn't know me. And I sat at a Toastmasters, and I don't remember where it was, but I remembered there was something I couldn't place between having seen your face, heard your voice, and the day that we met. And I couldn't place it until that day. And it was at a Toastmaster somewhere, and you came in and gave this electrifying opening to your talk. And more so, I would call it, you opened your talk with a story that I was on the edge of my seat. It was like, and I've noticed that that's a strong element of your coaching and training and your style. And I want to actually jump into that because I think for me, the way you tell stories, first of all, I want to ask, what's the importance of the way you open with stories? Why does it matter? And I think I've heard the reasonings, but I just love the way you tell stories. It's like you bring someone right out of their seat into the story. I want to start there with storytelling, why it's such a big deal as we unpack this conversation around winning high stakes presentations, being more confident on stage, and really structuring great talks. And can we start there?
Oh, absolutely. So you've seen me do this before. So for those of you who are watching this, now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to miss this. So I usually put my hands up talking animals, and I say stories are sticky. And that's the reason I begin with a story. Typically, for example, yesterday I was on a call. I'm going to design a keynote that I'm going to give in June. And I'm looking at my notes and I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm going to start off with this story. And I'm going to end with this story because it was based on what the customer wants me to do, the messages they want to incorporate for this particular audience. Stories are sticky. They are, and I use what I call the CSI approach for many of my stories. And the CSI approach is, have you ever seen a television series, CSI? There's Vegas, which is, come back. There used to be New York. There used to be Miami. Every single episode began with someone bleeding or there was a body. Okay. They began at the scene of the crime. Most of my stories, I begin at the scene of the crime. I bring you into the story. Now, again, stories are sticky. And when I start that way, and sometimes I start in the middle, I don't start at the beginning. That's even stickier in terms of starting in the middle of the scene. First of all, what's going on? Where are we? Who are? Guess what? People lean in. Right. Our brains are built on questions. So when someone is curious about something, and by the way, curiosity is a superpower in terms of storytelling. Whenever you can incorporate curiosity into your storytelling, makes people even more engaged, and they want these questions answered. And then if you begin in the middle and you work your way back, and by the way, this is a very advanced technique, and you go all the way to the beginning, then they'll be there for the entire story. So if you watch the television series CSI, for the most part, they use that format week in and week out. They begin in the middle and they work their way around. I do the same thing. I'm introduced. I don't say I'm happy to be here. I call that preamble, pre-ramble. I don't do any preamble. I don't do pre-ramble. I just get on with it. So
That's
those
right.
are some of my, ideas with regard to stories. So how do I tell stories? Here's the cool part about this. Every one of your listeners can tell a story. Every one of them can tell a story. And here's the cool part. When you tell a story that's unique to you, no one's heard it before. And guess what? We're going to be engaged. We're going to listen. We're going to be on the edge of our seats. And what I try to do, and a friend of mine, his name is Craig Valentine, he says, I want to bring people into my reliving room. I love that expression. You want to bring people into your reliving room. So, for example, I have multiple airport stories. Well, I want you to be there with me at the airport when I'm telling that story. I've got like an even more advanced technique as opposed to me telling you about those circumstances. I use the word imagine, and I have the audience member go through the story as if he or she are actually going through those circumstances. And again, that's even more engaging. So that's another advanced technique.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny that you bring up the airport thing, because I remember that's what I asked you. I'm like, I don't remember it, but there was something about an airport. I could not stop. I knew it was an airport. I don't remember the whole story, but
Yeah.
it was fantastic. And you said that, so this, man, we're jumping so fast. Let me stop and pump the brakes.
Sure.
Let's go back a little bit, because we're going to start. By the way, this is going to be a masterclass, everyone. If you're listening, you just imagine that you just paid him a good chunk of change, because he is the master at this. He is the master at this game. Let me tell you. So it's truly an honor. Let's go back a little bit. What got you started in the world of public speaking?
Wow. There's a question that gets me. I'm going to give you, is it okay if I give you the long version as opposed to the short version?
We'll take the long version. We only have 45 minutes, but
okay. What I mean by the long version?
It'll set the proper context.
It'll set the context. So as a child, I stuttered, and there is no cure for stuttering. My dad was in the military, so every couple of years we would move to a new neighborhood. And every time we moved to a new neighborhood, kids would make fun of me. Like, how many of you know that kids can be they can be the cruelest people on earth? So we're moving back to Chicago for a second time, this time into a different neighborhood. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm sick of being made fun of. So every day, every morning, I would take a magazine or a newspaper and I would read it out loud in front of a mirror. Every night before I went to bed, I would do the same thing. One day I got the brilliant idea to do play-by-play. So the kids in the neighborhood like to play basketball. So one day I went out and I said, hey, who's your favorite basketball player, etc. I memorized the character names, and I literally did live play-by-play on the playground. I go to the new school, Oak Cave Elementary in Chicago, Illinois. None of the kids know I'm a stutterer because I work so hard at not being made fun of. Fast forward to high school. I go to a high school. It is one of the first in Chicago that actually has a television studio. I'm the news anchor for several years. I go to University of Illinois. I actually get a job as a disc jockey at a real radio station, not a student-run radio station. And that's how I funded my college education. So looking back on things, and eventually I was an executive in the computer industry for a number of years. And then I entered the World Championship. And that's how I won the World Championship. But it started with me. The goal here was not to be made fun of by kids.
Wow.
That's my real start.
Wow, that's powerful. So, that's the goal was not to be made fun of. So
that was it.
The avoidance of pain drove you to your purpose.
Absolutely. Now, looking back on it, it's a clear path. Like I love the phrase from the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, his famous commencement speech, connecting the dots. You can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can clearly connect the dots looking backwards. And that was my path in terms of how I got here today.
Wow. You spent a number of years as a really high performing, top of the class sales professional, national account executive.
Mm-hmm.
How do you believe, where do you believe, and I know Toastmasters is going to come into the scene, but what made you such a high-performing sales executive during that stretch? I mean, I don't remember the exact statistics, but what do you think made you a great sales professional?
Throughout my career, I sold like close to $500 million worth of products and services. Now, back then, that sounded like a lot of money. I have a friend of mine who's still in the business. His quota is $5 billion for 1 year. So things have changed. So things have changed. But initially, my dad was an executive in Xerox, so he was kind of like my coach in terms of helping me early on in my career. But I think the turning point for me came when I realized that we would have these, what I call win or go home, or what I've now termed a high stakes presentation. That is, you're pitching in front of a committee or decision makers. You'll, like the NBA, you've only got one shot, you've only got one opportunity, and it's win or go home. And these win or go home presentations, I thought they were dreadfully boring. I think they were awful. There was like, I call it a PowerPoint parade or a data dump. We were just dumping data on people. It was one mind-numbing slide after the other. And then one day I said, like, why not? Like, let's make this fun. Let's make this fun. Let's see if we can somehow entertain the people. Now, my bosses were against it. But I was like, give me this. We've been losing business anyway. What do we got to lose?
Right.
And so I decided to make it an experience. And all of a sudden, our close rate went through the roof. And there were many instances where our competitors, their products and services, their solutions were better than ours. But I think what happened was the decision makers said, you know what? Your solution is going to work. We don't need the best. We want to work with you. And that was the aha. That was the insight. That's when I started telling stories. I didn't realize that's what I was doing then. But I told stories. I didn't talk tech. I just told, here's this particular client. This is how they use our product and services. This is the type of ROI they got from it. This is how they solved that problem. And I never spoke tech. And I got that lesson from one of the top sales representatives. Her name was Susie Rosenberg. And I remember I just came from IBM school. I had all the speeds and fees memorized. And we went on this account call with this major oil and gas manufacturer. And we're in front of the CEO, and I'm up there. I got the speeds and feeds, bit, byte, and baud. I got it down. And Susie says to the executive, she says, will you excuse me? Excuse us just for a second. And we go outside in the hall. And she said, stop talking. Stop talking. He says, you're not paying attention to the fact that his eyes are glazed over. She says, you're having the wrong conversation with this person. He doesn't care about that. He's going to be polite. He's going to be nice. And he's going to dismiss us. Stop talking. I'm going to take over the call. She took over the call, and she never spoke any tech. And by the way, she was one of the most technically competent people in our entire company. And that was a huge aha for me. And when he started asking the technical questions, she says, that's a very good question. How about we do this? How about you get together with your technical people? I'll bring in my technical experts, and we'll have them chat together. And that way they can see, they can answer each other's questions. She could have answered the question that he wanted, but she was setting up the sale. So, Susie Rosenberg, one of my all-time sales heroes in terms of my early teachers, in terms of teaching me how to stage a sale.
Wow. That's such a great, here's someone who saw not just an opportunity to coach, train, give you some educational piece, but we need those, right? We need someone to step in and not just let it go passively by error, right? So, and then you were humble enough to say, okay, I've got something to learn here. And it made you that much better.
Yep.
When did you transition to feeling as though you needed to go to a Toastmasters to get better? And even more so, enter a competition to become one of the best in the world? I mean, what was that transition like?
Well, two separate brief stories. Number one, got fired. So I got fired from my job, my high-paying job. And looking back on it, the person who fired me, what had happened is got a brand new boss. this boss was doing something that we were a publicly held company and had word gotten out what he was doing because he was fudging the numbers. It could have impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. The company's stock would have gone down, et cetera. So I go to the president. However, I wasn't politically savvy enough to present evidence, and this person was extremely savvy. He was able to hide what he did for like almost a year. So I was fired for accusing an officer wrongly with no evidence, et cetera. And then they found out like a year later. But me being fired, and he also did something else. He actually ruined my reputation. So I was in the computer hardware distribution arena. I had a very, very nice name in that area, but no one was willing to touch me. So I literally had to switch over to the software part of the arena where no one knew me. And I literally had to start all over again from scratch. It turned out to be a blessing. So the software company I started working for, they said, "Hey, Ed, we need to go out there and hustle and go out to, the Chamber of Commerce and, meet and, shake hands, et cetera." And I knew how to do that. And then I had a friend of mine, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to this club called Toastmasters." Her name is Nancy Spurry. And I said, "Oh, okay, what's that about?" She says, "It's a bunch of people, they're meeting and there's business owners." I says, "Okay, cool, I'm coming." I said, "What time's the meeting?" She says, "At 7:00. I said, "Okay, I'll pick you up tomorrow night." She says, "No, it's 7:00 in the morning." I said, 7:00 in the morning? This group is called Toastmasters. They're going to be drinking in the morning? I'm in,
Right.
So I show up and I was so bummed, it's just like
hilarious.
They were only drinking coffee and tea, no hard alcohol. I'm thinking these people are alcoholics, right? And I meet this gentleman who is, he's the founder of this particular club. And then after, I show up for a couple of weeks, and after a couple of weeks, he said, "Hey, you need to enter this thing called the World Championship of Public Speaking." And I had no idea what he was talking about. At the time, I was traveling a great deal, and I couldn't enter the contest anyway. And after about a year, almost every single week, he was after me to enter this contest. And it was starting to get awkward. It was really weird. I said to myself, I'm tired of having this conversation, with him. So I had a conversation with him, and I said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'm going to enter this contest once. And after I lose, we will never have this conversation again. Are we clear?" And he says, "Yes." And I never lost.
Of course.
I entered the contest once, my one and only time entering that contest, and I won the contest. And as it turns out, he was completely right, about, his name is Randall Shelton. And Randall, thank you, my friend.
What is it about? How do you prepare to win a speaking competition? What is that like? Because in a way, a high stakes presentation, sales presentation, seminar speech, keynote speech, in a way, you could look at it as a competition to deliver, to add value, to win the sale, to build relationships. But take us through the mindset of and by the way, that wasn't the big one, because there's levels to their competitions. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I ultimately won the big one. Yes. But, so there's 6 different rounds. It's almost a year.
Yeah. So it takes a while, right? So you're going through it's like the playoffs.
It is the playoffs.
It's like the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. So you got to win over and over, and it's one and done, right?
Yeah. And it's the other thing too, when I competed, you had to have 3 different speeches. So you could take one speech so far, then all of a sudden you had to have a new speech. And then for the finals, you had to have a brand new speech as well. So there's multiple layers to it as well. So in terms of mindset, entering the contest, I only want to my own goal here is to get Randall off my back. That was my original motivation.
That sounds similar to the earlier story.
Exactly. It's just like, okay, I
He's
like
getting
this
on my
club.
nerves, so I'm just trying to get that to stop.
Exactly.
I see the theme, Ed. I see the theme.
I just want this to stop.
The MindShift Podcast has just identified the success secret of Ed Tate. And I think this isn't the first time we heard this now. Continue, my friend. That's fantastic.
Well, the other thing, too, is going to the contest is I already told you one story, Susie Rosenberg. The one thing I discovered about winners, they think differently from everyone else. Winners think differently. They've got a different mindset. They've got a different approach. They don't follow the crowd. They don't follow the pack. They don't follow the herd. They're not lemmings. So when I got into the contest, I knew that what my superpower was. I'm a good storyteller. Randall told me that. My club told me that. So I actually went to the club. It says, over the past year and a half of the stories I've told, which ones do you like? And they told me the 3 stories that they like. And 2 of those stories helped me make it to the finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking. The third story I had to create. And so that was one thing, is this, okay, that's my superpower. I'm good at that. And then I start getting this advice. When I was creating my championship story has audience participation. So you can go on my website, edtate.com, or just go into YouTube, just type in One of Those Days by Ed Tate, and you'll see it. And it's audience participation. You can actually hear the audience participating. I'm going to say 99% of well-meaning, good-intentioned Toastmasters told me not to do that because, in quote unquote, the judges won't like that. And I said, well, of those 99% of the people, did you win the contest? And they said, well, no. I knew that for a fact because no one in our division, our district, had won before. And I said to myself, successful people. So how about I contact the people who've actually won this contest? Right. So I actually contacted 5 world champions. All 5 of them said, your idea is a winner. Go for it. Wow. It's going to separate you from the pack. And I said, cool. And I said, if the judges don't like it, well, I'm going to go down based on what I feel is right. Because every morning I would wake up and this idea would not leave me. It wouldn't go away. And even though it had never been done before, you don't do audience participation. The judges aren't going to like it. And I said to myself, you know what? The judges are part of the audience. And if I make it fun for them, if I make it fun for the audience, they're going to see this. In all likelihood, they're going to have some fun too. So you know what? I'm going for it. And that's what I decided to do. Now, the well-meaning, good-intentioned Toastmasters, they warned me for a reason. And the reason was this. It's a timed contest. You have a minimum of 4 minutes and 30 seconds and a maximum of 7 minutes and 30 seconds. If you're 1 second over, you're disqualified. Yeah. In my rehearsals, my championship speech was 6 minutes and 10 seconds. I had plenty of time. I could just leisurely give this speech. However, when I'm in front of 2,500 people, what I discovered quickly was, number one, they laughed in places they never laughed before. Number two, they laughed longer than they ever laughed before.
Right.
So when the timing lights come on, so there's a green light that says, hey, you've hit the 4 minute and 30 second mark, I was okay. They had spotlights on the stage. I couldn't see when the yellow light went on. I never saw the yellow light. And then all of a sudden, the red light was on. And when the red light was on, based on my rehearsals, I was way behind in my speech. And I said to myself, oh my God. So here I am. I've worked damn near a year and I'm about to fail. And I got a piece of advice from one of those world champions, a guy by the name of Mark Brown. And he kind of warned me. He said, Ed, people are going to laugh in places they never laughed before. They're going to laugh longer. He says, have an emergency ending. So on the stage, in that moment, I came up with my emergency ending and I ended where I felt I needed to end. I literally chopped off like the last 2 paragraphs of my speech. Wow. Now, if you watch the video, you will see that I am not smiling when I leave the stage. I thought I had been disqualified. So when I sit down in the audience and everyone's going, you crushed it, you killed it, you're hands down the best speaker, I'm just completely distraught. I'm literally this close to tears because I said to myself, I can't believe I spent a year of my life and I've just ruined it. I just blew it. So before they announced the winner, so the world championship, they announced if there have been any disqualifications. I was not listening for the winners announcement. I was listening for the disqualification. Announcement.
There's that theme again. There's that theme again. Hey, I ain't got to be on the rest of this show to understand how this one goes.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. I think you have cured me. You've uncovered something.
I think we've
about
unlocked the
myself.
key. I think we've unlocked the subconscious key. I think I knew you were here for the right reason.
So as soon as I heard like there were no disqualifications, I just relaxed. I said, "Oh God!" I didn't even care if I won.
Right.
I didn't want to embarrass all those people who had supported me. I didn't want to embarrass the district. That was my whole thing. And when I won, I was genuinely shocked. I was genuinely shocked and surprised.
Yeah, because you had already painted a picture. One of those keys that I know you talk about, which I want to get into. You had painted a picture in your mind that I blew it.
Yep.
I blew it.
Yep.
I didn't get disqualified, but I definitely didn't win. And so that's pretty incredible. What happens actually? Football teams, they go to Disneyland, right? They go to Disneyland. What does the world champion of public speaking do after take it in that moment? First of all, I want to celebrate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just appreciate that because you also slid right through it, but you gave a year of your life just to prepare for the contest.
Yep.
And in the moment, you hadn't anticipated a couple of things, although you may have gotten a little bit of the advice. You're like, not a problem. I still have a minute and 20 seconds to play with here. Mm-hmm. But you did so well that it actually hurt you. Is that what, you got them so engaged and laughing so hard that it threw off your timing to the point where, so you win. What do you do? How do you, what do you do? You go to Disneyland? What does that mean?
Okay, so, no one's ever asked me that question before. So I will actually show you.
Okay.
What happens.
And for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, we'll take a second. He's going to show. Okay. If you're not on YouTube, you got to pop over to YouTube or our website. He's showing this beautiful trophy.
You get this. You get this Lucite trophy. Okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
There is no cash. There is no money. There is no prize money. There's nothing. Okay. And how I knew that this was something that I could leverage because of my business acumen. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was up to me to leverage this. And you made me think of something else prior to winning. It's the night before the contest, and I had these two insights the night before the contest. I had a friend of mine. His name was Richard. He actually flew down from Denver to the club. It was it was at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. And Richard surprised me. He shows up, and I had snuck into the venue the night before because I wanted to practice. I wanted to be on the big stage. I wanted to practice on the stage, and I wanted to practice over and over again. And I wanted to when I got on that stage, I wanted to just mentally, mindset wise, just own it. That's what I wanted to do. So he was there. He was the only person there, and he's the person who told me. He says, "Well, how's it feel to have defeated 30,000 people?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, yeah, the contest, there's anywhere from 25,000 to 30,000 people who enter the contest every year. Tomorrow's only going to be the 9 of you." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, since you put it that way, I think I could take the 8."
Right.
I think I could take 8.
I got 8. I hadn't even thought about the 25,000.
I had no idea the entire time. My ignorance was actually an advantage for me, not knowing that. I think had I known that from the beginning, I don't know how that would have changed things. The other thing that took place, there was a party the night before. And for whatever reason, they had given us these badges. We put them over our necks, and they identified us as contestants. And I don't know what it did, but it made us radioactive. For some reason, since it's the night before the contest, people didn't want to talk to us. They just thought that, it's like, a pitcher, pitching a no-hitter. You don't want to talk to them. It was that type of thing. They weren't being rude. They weren't being. I think they were just trying, in their own way, being respectful of us,
giving you space before game day, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just and they haven't. By the way, they haven't done that since. Because we gave them that feedback. It's like this made us radioactive. But I remember thinking to myself, there's 1,000 people at this party. Nobody knows who I am. But if I win tomorrow, even though Ed Tate has not changed, their perception of me will have changed, and everyone's going to want a piece of me. And that's exactly what happened. When I got off the stage, I stepped off the stage, and there was this rush of people. It was crazy. It was to the point where it was so awkward. So many people came at the same time. I literally was trapped in a corner, and a couple of people had to push people away. I was like, wow, this is what it's going to be like to be famous, you know? And I spent like the next couple of hours like signing autographs and taking pictures and things of that nature. But what happened, I said to myself, you know, this is nice, but no one's really going to care beyond Toastmasters. And how can I use this and how can I leverage this? So what I did almost immediately, I contacted media, let them know I did before. This was like before social media was a thing. Mm-hmm. I did my own social media. I did my own broadcasting. I did my own getting the word out, etc. And then I was fortunate enough to be signed by an agent, a couple of speakers bureaus, and a training company. And for the next 7 years, they booked me. I never had to pick up a phone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's what happened there. Yeah. But again, you've got to take whatever it is and you've got to leverage it. You're responsible. You know, it is marketing malpractice for you not to do that.
I love it. Such a great story. I mean, congratulations again. I knew there was a journey, and I know we've only covered a piece of the journey. But what I want to do now as we transition to the back half of this is probably the vast majority of the people listening to this are not going to want to compete in a competition for a year and get that beautiful trophy that you just showed us. What they want is to win these high stake presentations, these sales opportunities. You have, at least I know of, a sequence or a series of training on your website that talks about 10 tips to winning high stakes presentations, but I'm happy to let this go wherever you want to go. I'd like to get into 2 or 3 before we wrap up today, because there's just no way to unpack all of what you do with your coaching. And by the way, your business model tell us about your business model. It's speaking. Is it coaching?
Yes, I coach one-on-one. We're about to also launch a group coaching program for people who coach with me one-on-one. They pay a premium, if you will, and not everyone necessarily can afford that. We're about to launch the second half of this year a group type of program. I also have products and services. I also do training for companies, etc. So me and my clients have hired me. Like I've got one client who's hired me 13 years in a row, if you will. So I have multiple income streams, if you will, or multiple ways in terms of how I can help your clients solve the problem.
Right. So that's what I wanted to articulate was, if you're listening to this right now, we're only going to be able to get into a few of these great tips, and there's plenty more where it comes from is what I'm getting at. We're going to make sure we link up this, the winning presentation. I believe I've watched that one. And if I haven't watched that one, I've watched a version of that one. And it is absolutely one of the most engaging presentations I've ever seen. And that's after I already saw the one that I saw live. When I tell you this guy, when he gets in the zone, you ain't leaving your chair and you'll do exactly what he tells you to do, like you've been hypnotized. And he didn't take anything from you. So anyway, Ed, let's talk about, first of all, how did you come up with this idea of high stakes presentations, and how do you define a high stakes presentation? Then we'll get into a couple of the tips.
A high stakes presentation is a presentation where it's for you, it's win or go home. That is, you're pitching, like it could be a job interview. It can be, obviously, you're pitching your business or your company, maybe for funding. It's a sale, or like I said, like we were talking about before we went online. I helped this architectural firm, and they had 3 of their 4 new architects were losing deals. At a minimum, it was costing the company at least $2 million per year. We were able, and their failure rate was 75%. We were able to increase, we got it up to 50%. Now, I want to point out something. Now, if you're a salesperson, that's not a great improvement. But we're talking non-sales professionals. We're talking, in this case, architects, engineers, project managers, dentists, engineers, etc. People who aren't selling as a part of their career, and we're teaching them how to close more business. So in this particular case, the company, they won an additional $5 million worth of business. By the way, the $2 million I quoted earlier was my number that I quoted. They actually had quoted a higher number in terms of how much it was costing them. I said conservatively, let's just say that you're only losing $2 million. So that's what we did there. We help these, and again, architect, you got one shot. You got one opportunity in front of the committee because you're competing against someone else. Before we went on the air, I told this story of one of my clients who's an engineer. She is a very, very technical engineer. The first 3 conversations, I didn't understand a word that she said. And I said to her, what we need to do before you make this presentation in front of this committee is you need to speak English. You need to recognize, you need to come up with a version of your presentation for civilians. And that's exactly what we did. Not only did she was the only person who got an award. It was $1 million. Plus they gave her a bonus award of an additional $2 million because we were able to simplify her presentation to the point where her ideas were accessible. And that's what I try to do with these technical professionals. Recognize that you have different audiences. If she was talking in front of other engineers, she wouldn't need me because they speak the same language. But she wasn't talking to the same. She was talking to a different audience. She was, remember our beginning of the conversation, wrong mindset, wrong audience, in this case, the language she was using, it was almost like she was speaking French before. We have to speak that person's language. And that's the thing. That's one of the keys in terms of winning the high stakes presentation. The other thing is mindset. I love your show. I love the name of your show. It's mindset. I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. And, this is how I got my start in terms of being confident. I had a cousin growing up. His name was Pretty Ricky. All right. Pretty Ricky was extremely handsome. All right. Let me tell you how Pretty Ricky was. When we used to go to parties on the weekend. I was in high school. I went to high school in Chicago. And by the way, I was painfully shy at the time. Whenever we would go to a party, girls would walk up to Ricky unsolicited and hand him phone numbers. It happened every single weekend. It didn't matter if we went on the north side, south side, lake side, west side. It didn't matter. And then Ricky would take these phone numbers and he would throw them in the air, and let it rain. And then you remember like in Halloween, you used to sort, the good candy from the fruit.
Yep. Yeah.
He would do the same thing with phone numbers.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, in high school, senior year, South Shore High School, North Building. The seniors and juniors were in the North Building. The freshmen and the sophomores were in the South Building. It's in between the second and third period. We're walking down the hallway, and he says, "Eddie, when are you going to ask Lolita Barnes out to the prom?" I had the biggest crush on Lolita Barnes. 4 years went by. 4 years. I was so afraid to talk to her. I never even said hello to her. And I said to him, well, first of all, she would never go out with a guy like me. I says, number one, academically, out of the 492 seniors, she's ranked number 5. She's very smart. Number 2, she's a cheerleader. She's very popular. Number 3, today she was named prom queen. She's beautiful. She'll never go out with a guy like me. And Ricky said, let me ask you a few questions. Question number 1, is she going out with you right now? I said, no. Question number 2, if you ask her out on a date and she says no, will she be going out with you in the future? I said no. So he says, she's not going out with you now. And if you ask her and she says no, she won't be going out with you you won't be going out with her in the future. Is that right? Right. So your circumstances haven't changed, right? Right. He says, so you've got nothing to lose by asking her. He says, Eddie, but if she says yes, then everything changes. And the words he said to me next changed the trajectory of my life. And he said, don't you say no before they say no. Never tap out. Never take yourself out of the game. Always ask. Don't you say no before they say no. Never tap out. Never take yourself out of the game. Always ask. That is the essence of winning a high stakes presentation.
Wow. Okay. Pretty Ricky. We appreciate you, brother.
By the way, that is all the good wisdom that Pretty Ricky ever had.
That's all he had. That's all he had. So as you were telling the story, like everybody listening, every guy I'm pretty sure listened to this had a Pretty Ricky in their life.
Exactly.
Whether it was a cousin or a good friend, where they walk in the room and the girls just were like, "Hey."
Oh. Yep.
I don't know that any of my Pretty Ricky homies gave me that kind of advice, though. So, and some of them might be listening. I'm sorry, but they never gave me that kind of advice. That was a fantastic. I love that point at the end. Never say no before they do. That's pretty profound. So let's talk to the audience about a couple of things. You just gave them one, right? That's probably one of them. Let's give them something else. What else is it that goes to your mind when you're coaching and training? And by the way, I can't wait to hear about what you got coming up this summer. What else is important when it's win or go home?
So, the previous conversation I talked about where I got the emergency keynote, monetized the problem. The architectural firm, that contract was worth like 120 grand. This keynote, I got my full fee. I got my full fee for a virtual presentation. And by the way, I didn't negotiate a dime, okay? Because I was able to monetize the problem. What is this problem costing you? What is this issue costing you? And I didn't put the numbers. I get a number from the client. So this emergency keynote, that client told me, yeah, we lost 7 customers last year. Each client's worth $250,000. Simple math. Okay?
It's their math, right? It's their
exactly.
Math.
It's their math. That's exactly.
Math.
The architectural firm. I says, okay, how much is this costing you? What's going on here? We have 10 new architects. What are they doing? They're losing 3 out of 4 deals. Wow, 75%. Give me the range of the deals: 180,000 to 3.2 million. Okay, let's be really conservative. Let's say like they're worth 180,000 a piece. So let's call it 200,000. Okay. So conservatively, it's costing you $1 million. It's costing us more than that. Well, let's just go conservative. Right. So I'm. It's their math.
They don't know what you're doing.
It's their numbers.
Yeah, you're getting to their math.
Exactly. So now I've got conservatives. They agree with me. It's $1 million. I do value-based pricing. I don't do hourly pricing. I think hourly pricing is the dumbest model ever. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
That's just my opinion. All right. So now I got a number. I got $1 million. I want to give my client at least a 10x ROI. So if I give them a 10x ROI, guess what my fee is going to be? It's going to be $100,000.
$100,000
for the for the first option. Okay. And then I'm going to have another option, and I'm going to have another option. So my other thing for you is to learn how to monetize their problem. And you do this by shutting up and asking questions. Okay.
Right.
That's what I was, that's what my original Susie Rosenberg told me. She said, shut up, start asking questions, stop telling and start asking. Start asking questions and start listening. Yeah. So that's tip number 3, ask questions. Here's the type of questions you ask. What or how type of questions. Why questions you have to be careful with. Why questions have a tendency to put people on the defensive. Okay. So you have to be careful with your intention and your tone when you're asking a why question. However, a what or a how question, it opens the conversation up. Yeah. And my favorite question on planet Earth is after I've asked a question is what else? Because what it'll do is we've got a topic, we've got a subject. Now what else takes it a little bit deeper? And then guess what I'm going to do again? I'm going to ask another variation of the question, what else? Well, tell me more about that. Could you elaborate a little bit more? I want to go 4 or 5 levels deep. And when I go 4 or 5 levels deep, that's where the good information comes from. A lot of people have, like people who interview, they've got their sound bites already practiced and rehearsed, for that first level and that second level. But the third level, there's no rehearsal for that. There's no practice. Right. There's no sound bites there. That's when the good information comes. And that's when the truth comes out.
Yeah, Ed, that's so powerful. Listen, audience, if you're listening to this, and if you haven't heard me say it in this particular podcast, medium or somewhere in our group coaching, I always say that, by the way, Ed, I got taught that structure of asking questions back in 2000, 2002. And I say what happens is when you get to level 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, they get out of their head and they get into their heart.
Ooh, love that.
We get out of their head, which was already pre-framed. It was already pre-scripted. It was already rehearsed.
Yep.
When you keep going and you can't, like you said, you'll ask what else? Tell me more about that. So there's ways to get down the line. And I always say you got to get them out of their head and get them at least somewhere out of their head down towards their heart. I always call it the head to heart conversation. So
Nice.
I love that. That was spot on. So
Yes.
let's go back over those three. So the first one was the never say no before they do.
Yeah. Don't you say no before they say no. Never tap out. Never take yourself out of the game. Always
Never
ask.
take yourself out of the game.
Yeah.
Second one was.
Well, I'm sorry. I just thought of another story there.
Oh yeah,
forgive me.
See, I'm asking the master of public speaking who lives
all of a sudden, like
trains.
Ooh.
Stories are sticky. Y'all heard it at the beginning. Now you know he lives his own work. You're like stories are sticky. He's got a story for everything. Well, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. Let's see. Don't you say no before they say no. Yeah, I threw you off. Okay. So second
monetize.
Yeah. You want to monetize the problem. You want to monetize a problem. And again, use their words, use their math, if you will. Okay.
Their words, their math. I love that. Yep. I think I did that yesterday during a call. I had a little hesitation from a company that was hiring us or wants to hire us as an agency, doesn't quite understand what we do. Again, the technical aspect of it. And I asked him, I said, well, let me ask this question. If you invested what we've discussed, I said, what is the average deal or average revenue size per customer? And so anyway, I walked him through it. I'm not going to spend time here, but I believe I did what you described yesterday in that call. And then the third tip was, how did I forget it just that quick? Or did we only cover two?
I think we only covered two.
Covered two. Okay, let's go for number three.
All right. So, this is a variation of what we've already talked about. So I was just thinking of one of my coaching clients yesterday. He was able to get a client to pay him $15,000 per month for the next year, and they paid for the entire thing in advance.
I love those kind of deals.
And the reason he was able to do that is because he was able to show to the client that there's value here. So the conversation he had with her, and it wasn't a technical conversation. He says, this is what he told her. He says, I'm going to save you, and he works in federal sales. I'm going to save you anywhere from 12 months to 18 months. You're going to get a deal 12 months to 18 months faster. Your deals I work with, the playground I work on, is going to be anywhere from 5 million to 500 million. So if that's your playground, then you're going to win a deal in this particular area. You may be familiar with the pieces. A lot of people are familiar with the pieces of this. Like you could get pieces on YouTube. You can get pieces from a book, etc. But you know what? He says, I'm going to give you a system. He says, you don't want pieces. You want a system. You don't want pieces. You want a process as to how this works from A to Z. And I'm going to be your guide. I'm going to walk you through that. So if you want to win a high stakes presentation, you got to be bold. You got to tell people, like, look, this is what I'm going to do for you. Okay. And don't be afraid of your prices or your fees. Okay. You're helping, you're not hawking. That's the mindset you have to have. I am helping you. I'm not hawking. You're going to get this result. You're going to get this quantifiable, measurable result by working with me. And that's the mindset you need to adopt, regardless of whatever products and services that your listeners have.
Nice. Ed, so many gems. Again, man, this has been power packed since the minute we hit record. We didn't even get a chance to go over I was going to ask you about the three elements of opening a speech or a presentation, the KFD formula. We'll have to save that for the next time. We can
do a part two. There you go. There you go.
Have you back another time, because listen,
a cliffhanger.
By the way,
that's another tip. Have cliffhangers for your customers and your clients. There
you go. So next time on the MindShift Podcast. And it's been an absolute pleasure, as I've said to you many a time. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing you from a distance initially, just having respect for that speech and what I learned that night at that first Toastmasters presentation, to the pleasure and privilege of having you in our audience at an event and then at VIP dinner that night. And then you were recently just featured on an ABC interview of some sort, and in Forbes, something like that. I mean, you're on a roll, man. Tell everybody really quick about those two things.
So if you go on LinkedIn, just look, Ed Tate, CSP, both article, like I was interviewed by Forbes magazine and also interviewed by ABC News, and they wanted me to evaluate the acceptance speeches from the Oscars and who did well and why the others did so poorly. So if you're curious about that, just at Tate CSP, or you can just Google it on Forbes magazine. And that was, again, a high stakes presentation. Planet Earth is watching you accepting an award. What are you going to do? Are you going to wing it? And winging it, you risk ruining your reputation. Or are you going to prepare? And by the way, they only had 45 seconds. Here's something that's counterintuitive. The less time you have to present, the more you need to prepare, because every word matters.
Wow. There's no better way to end. Ed Tate, my friend, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the MindShift podcast today. Where can people find you? What would be that number one spot you'd want them to go connect and learn more about you?
Just go to edtate.com, edtate.com. That's it.
Awesome. Always ask this final question before we wrap up the show. And that is, with all the work that you're doing, the companies you're working with, the people that you're inspiring, the people that you talk to, the hundreds and thousands of people that I'm sure have been impacted by your work over the years. If for whatever reason today happened to be your last day on this planet, what would you want everyone to remember you for?
Oh, wow. That I was a good dad. We didn't get into this. This is for the next podcast. I have a 4-year-old daughter and I have a 36-year-old son. So that's a story by itself. But if today were my last day, I would want the world to know that I love my children dearly and I was a good dad.
I love that. Ed, it's an absolute pleasure. We'll definitely have to have you back for a round 2. And thank you so much for your gracious hospitality of time, your wisdom. I mean, you dropped more nuggets that we're going to provide in the show notes, link up all the resources, that World Championship speech, as well as your website and those links over to your LinkedIn. Again, super humbled and grateful that you took the time out to be with us today.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Those listening, we want to thank you as well for taking time out of your day. You could have been anywhere on the planet, but you spent some time here with us today. I hope as you think about your leadership role, your speaking role, your sales role, heck, even as a parent, you can take some of these tips away from what Ed was talking about today. Because when we speak, I love what you said at the end, that the shorter amount of time we have to say something, the more impactful every word matters. That was just another gem right there. For those listening, we'd love for you to follow the show. If you got any value out of today's show, follow it, subscribe wherever you're listening right now. And again, if you know someone who is in a situation where they're giving high stakes presentations and they need to win more of them, make sure they listen to this episode so they can hear what Ed had to say and then have an opportunity to connect. It'll also help our show reach more impactful leaders like yourself. If you're not familiar with who I am, because I didn't tell you who I was earlier, my name is Darrell Evans. I'm the host of the MindShift Podcast, and I'll see you on another episode. Take care. Hey, it's Darrell Evans. Hit the subscribe button so you can become a part of the MindShift community. We'll help you shift your mind so you can shift your results.